Imagine a desert at night. No headlines, no speeches, only aircraft cutting through the dark. More than 90 precision weapons fall in minutes. Not to start a war, but to send a message. This is how power speaks in the modern world. Fast, decisive, unapologetic. After American soldiers were killed in Syria, Washington did not debate for long. It struck back hard across dozens of targets with overwhelming force. I want you to pause here because this moment is not just about terrorism. It is about how the United States now defines justice, deterrence, and vengeance. When a president says, "We will find you anywhere," he is not only addressing enemies, he is speaking to allies, to rivals, and to a world watching closely. If you want to understand where global power is heading, stay with me, because what happened in Syria is only the surface. To understand why this strike mattered, we need to step back and see the system behind it. What we are really looking at is a shift in how conflict is framed. This was not a battlefield clash between armies. It was not a declaration of war. It was a calibrated act of punishment. The United States called it retaliation. Its military called it deterrence. Its leaders called it justice. But these words hide a deeper question. What happens when military power becomes a message rather than a strategy? In Syria, the enemy was clear: Islamic State fighters who killed American troops. The response was also clear: precision strikes, overwhelming force, no hesitation. Yet the context matters. Syria today is no longer the Syria of a decade ago. The Assad era has ended. The country is fractured, fragile, and politically undefined. And into that uncertainty, American firepower arrived again. So this is not just a story about punishing terrorists. It is about operating inside a collapsing state, about enforcing red lines where no stable order exists. To understand how we reach this moment, we must look backward to the forces that hollowed Syria out long before these strikes occurred. To understand this moment, we have to rewind the clock. Syria did not become fragile overnight. It was slowly emptied of authority, legitimacy, and control. For 13 years, civil war tore the country apart. Institutions collapsed, borders blurred, power fragmented. Then, in December 2024, the old order finally fell. The Assad regime was gone. What remained was not stability, but a vacuum. A new leadership emerged from rebellion, not consensus. Control was asserted, but the system underneath was brittle. Security depended on force, not trust. Unity existed on paper, not on the ground. In environments like this, extremist groups do not need strength. They need space, ungoverned areas, distracted authorities, a population exhausted by conflict. Islamic State did not return because it was powerful. It returned because the state was weak. That is the deeper mechanism at work. When states collapse, violence globalizes. Local instability becomes international risk. And this is why Syria matters far beyond its borders. Because when order breaks, outside powers inevitably step in. And that leads us to the first breaking point. The first crisis did not begin with a missile. It began with an ambush. In December, Islamic State fighters struck U.S. forces in central Syria. 2 American soldiers were killed, along with a civilian interpreter. For Washington, this crossed a line, because this was not symbolic violence. It was a direct challenge to American presence and to American credibility. What followed was not hesitation, but escalation. Operation Hawkeye Strike was activated. Dozens of targets, multiple waves. Aircraft from the US and its partners moving as one system. This was not designed to win territory. It was designed to restore deterrence. Here is the deeper meaning. In fragile states, attacks are never isolated. They test resolve, they probe limits, They ask a simple question: how much pain are you willing to tolerate? The US answer was immediate and unmistakable, but deterrence is never permanent. It must be constantly renewed, especially in regions where authority is contested and violence is cheap. If this analysis helps you see the world more clearly, stay with me. Because the visible strike hides an invisible system. To understand that system, we need to look beneath the explosions. What you don't see in these strikes is what truly matters. Not the aircraft, not the munitions, but the logic behind them. This operation was not about defeating Islamic State once and for all. It was about managing risk in a broken system. Here is the hidden mechanism. When a state collapses, power fragments. When power fragments, threats multiply. And when threats multiply, great powers stop seeking solutions and start enforcing boundaries. The United States is no longer trying to rebuild Syria. It is not trying to stabilize it. It is trying to contain the consequences of instability. That is a crucial shift. Precision strikes replace long occupations. Punishment replaces nation building. Speed replaces permanence. This is not weakness. It is strategic fatigue. Washington knows that eliminating every militant is impossible. So it focuses on something narrower, raising the cost of attack, sending a warning that violence will always be answered. But there is a paradox here. The more fragile the system becomes, the more often force must be used to hold it together. And that creates the conditions for the next crisis, because containment does not end instability. It only manages it. And management sooner or later breaks down. The second crisis arrived quietly, but it carried more weight. After the initial strikes, the campaign did not end. It expanded, more missions, more raids, more targets identified and eliminated. Nearly 25 Islamic State members were killed or captured in a matter of days. Not in one dramatic moment, but through sustained pressure. This is where escalation becomes structural, because every successful operation creates expectations. From allies, from commanders, from domestic audiences, the logic shifts. If strikes work, why stop? If deterrence is restored, why not reinforce it? But there is a cost, not measured in casualties alone, measured in permanence. The United States is now operating in a Syria without a stable center. Each strike fills a vacuum temporarily. Then the vacuum returns. This is the danger of managing chaos. You are forced to intervene not once, but repeatedly, not decisively, but indefinitely. And over time, temporary action becomes background reality. The crisis is no longer the attack itself. It is the normalization of force. And that normalization has consequences far beyond the battlefield, because eventually someone else pays the price. And that brings us to the people caught in between. Now, I want you to imagine this from a different angle. Not from Washington, not from a command center, but from the ground, from the perspective of ordinary people trying to survive. You live in a country that has already lost everything once. Your government collapsed. Your economy shattered. Your future became uncertain. And now, once again, the sky roars. You are not Islamic State. You are not American forces. You are simply in between. This is what prolonged instability does to civilians. Every strike, no matter how precise, reinforces one truth. Normal life cannot fully return. Markets hesitate. Reconstruction stalls. Fear becomes routine. And over time, something more dangerous happens. People stop believing in systems altogether. They rely on factions, on militias, on survival instincts. This is where extremism quietly regrows, not through ideology alone, but through exhaustion and despair. If you've ever wondered how endless conflict reshapes societies, this is it. And if this perspective matters to you, share this understanding with others. because the human cost is the bridge between military action and global consequence. And those consequences do not stop at Syria's borders. The impact does not end at Syria's borders. It never does, because every strike sends signals outward to allies watching American resolve, to rivals measuring American limits. In the Middle East, power vacuums attract competition. Regional actors recalibrate. Militias reposition. States hedge their bets. When the United States acts militarily, even in retaliation, it reshapes calculations far beyond the target zone. It reinforces one reality. America remains the ultimate enforcer when lines are crossed. But it also exposes a contradiction. Washington wants less involvement, yet instability keeps pulling it back in. This tension is not uniquely Syrian. It defines today's global order. A world where conflicts are local, but consequences are international, where weak states become arenas for global signaling. And there is another layer. Extremist groups study these patterns closely. They adapt, they disperse, they wait. So while the strikes may succeed tactically, the strategic environment grows more complex, more fragmented, more unpredictable. This is how modern geopolitics works now. Not through clear victories, but through managed disorder. To see where this path leads, we have to look ahead. If we look forward from this moment, three futures begin to take shape. The first is the optimistic one. Sustained pressure works. Islamic State remains weakened. Attacks become rarer, riskier, costlier. The fragile Syrian order, while imperfect, holds just enough to prevent collapse. In this scenario, force does what diplomacy cannot. It buys time, not peace but space. The second future is more likely. A long plateau of instability, no major escalation, no real resolution. Strikes continue intermittently. Militant cells adapt and survive. External powers intervene selectively, never fully committing, never fully leaving. Conflict becomes background noise. Managed, endured, normalized. And then there is the darkest path. The system breaks again. A larger attack, a miscalculation, a strike that pulls in new actors. Regional tensions spill over into something harder to contain. History tells us this is how entrenched conflicts reignite. Not through intention, but through accumulation. The lesson here is not about Syria alone. It is about systems under stress. When governance collapses, force becomes the default language, and the future is shaped not by choices but by reactions. That brings us to the final question. What does all of this mean for how we understand power today? We often think power is about control, about dominance, about winning. But what Syria shows us is something more unsettling. Power today is about management, managing instability, managing risk, managing consequences that can never be fully erased. The United States did not strike Syria to fix it. It struck to contain what could not be fixed, to signal limits, to enforce lines in a world where order no longer comes naturally. And this is the uncomfortable truth. Modern geopolitics is no longer about building stable systems. It is about preventing collapse from spreading. For you, watching this from afar, this matters, because these decisions shape the world you live in. The security you assume, the risks you inherit. When force becomes routine, we stop asking the hardest question. Not can we strike, but what kind of world are we sustaining by doing so? If this analysis changed how you see power, conflict, and the future, don't let it end here. Share it, discuss it, question it, because the next strike will come without warning, and the next decision will be framed as necessary. Understanding the system is the only way not to be surprised by it. This is not the end of the story. It is the pattern. And in the next video, we'll examine what happens when this pattern finally breaks.